the problem is that society is trying to do away with all shame on this topic. No, you should strut sexuality, you should put it out there, everything goes, and it is actually causing the destruction.
To the point of criminality in a way.
Absolutely. Not only, criminality and the part of what's going on the street, but now we're co-opting the mental health and medical fields to engage in surgeries for minors. I mean, things that are, to me, reprehensible. And, in the name of some giant, compassionate, and just free and clear, do whatever you want. And it's actually just going to destroy the fabric of society. And I think, we're trying to restore that healthy sense. Who you really are is something way beyond. And you have that sense. You have that sense when you lose your temper and you say, that wasn't me. Who was it? Right? You have a sense, I was out of touch with the authentic me. And the same thing when we feel like we just lusted. We just went after that animalistic piece. You feel, that's a healthy sense of shame that I was less than. But the idea that, no, I'm not a yeshiva bacher, I'm a pervert, I'm not a bas Yisrael, I'm some prutza, that's toxic shame. Anytime you're identifying yourself as bad, as negative, that's the Yitzhar, that's Sitra Acher. And that's where we need to really help restore actual healthy shame, because healthy shame is actually rooted in this pristine sense that you are a neshama, you're a chelek elokam mal.
Mamish.
Welcome back to the Meaningful People podcast. Thank you so much for clicking on this episode with Dr. Shloimie Zimmerman. What a guy. He is, first of all, he's a boss. He knows what he's talking about. He's got the credentials. He's done the research. And I am a sucker for statistics and research. There's so much in this episode. I would say that perhaps if you're below the age of 18, you might want to ask a parent or guardian if this is an episode that you should be listening to. Sensitive topics are discussed. So just a disclaimer on that. So if you're in a car with your kids right now, it's up to you. It's up to you. You could totally go for it, but it's up to you. Just wanted to make that disclaimer. Wanted to say that this episode is sponsored by our friends at Alpert Associates. They are getting so many phone calls and emails, especially around Yontif season. So many people are spending a lot of money, and you need to. What are you going to do? It's Yontif. You gotta buy things. Got to go to Collars & Co. and buy those shirts. You gotta make sure that your family has what they need for Yontif. But you also have to make sure that you're not going into the red. You got to make sure that you're taking care of your financial stability. So call Moshe Alpert, 718-644-1594. Send them an email at alpertmoshe@gmail.com. Free consultation. You might walk out and say, I don't really need the assistance, but that's something that you can have after you have a conversation with him. So make that phone call, have a conversation with Moshe Alpert. You will not regret that. This episode is also sponsored by our friends at Torah Umesorah. They have this amazing, amazing new program called Shir Hamailas. It's all about sharing the moment, the story, that highlight that you had with a Rebbe, a Morah, a teacher in your life. And we've all had them. So I remember when I was in 6th grade, I had a Rebbe by Naftali Golgrab. And I think that for me, I was like the class clown previously. And I maybe I wasn't the best student. I've said that in the past on this podcast. And I think after our first Gemara test, which I completely flunked, like really, really badly, maybe I didn't even care so much. Rabbi Golgrab came over to me and he said, this is not how it's going to be this year. You're going to try. You're going to do better. And it wasn't in a harsh way. It was a vote of confidence. And I really excelled that year. Thanks to Rabbi Golgrab, thanks to what he taught me. That's a story that sticks with me decades later. I'm not that old, maybe a decade. I don't know how long it's been. But that's an example of Shir Hamailas, this new program. Well, if you have a story, you have something that you want to share, join the effort, inspire others, and share your story. Go to shirhamailas.com, or you can share your story via email or video at shirhamailas@torah-umesorah.org. Or you can even call in and record your story at 718-766-4554. That's 718-766-4554. It's an amazing program, and I really think you should contribute. You should give them your story. I hope you really, really are able to gain from this episode of this podcast with Dr. Shloimie Zimmerman. It's a little bit of a different type of episode. We didn't delve so much into his history and his past as much as we did about the topic. So I hope you enjoy. You are listening to the Meaningful People podcast.
The podcast featuring our nation's most impactful, influential,
and meaningful people.
Gewalt. So welcome.
By the way, we got an email that people think you're using the word Gewalt wrong because there's a lot of people that think Gewalt means like, like people in Kikar Shabbos throw rocks. Gewalt.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So
I use it in the way that Shloimie Kalbach uses it, which is like it's short for gewaldig, but then elongated. So it's like short for gewaldig, but then gewalt.
So like we have a guest that says something extremely powerful, and you're like Gewalt, and everyone's like, "What is he saying? Why is he throwing a rock?"
Erroneous. They got to start listening to Shloimie's drushes.
Unbelievable. Yeah. Anyways, Gewalt. Go on.
So yeah, thank you so much for coming in today, and we're here to talk about, first of all, you, but second of all, a lot of the work that you're doing, and a lot of the work that you're doing is. It's really groundbreaking in mainstreaming and normalizing discussions that maybe previous generations weren't as comfortable embracing. And we're here to normalize that. We're here to shed that light and empower our generation to really educate themselves and engage with their children and with each other and really shed light on a topic that's sort of been behind closed doors. So it's not an easy task. It's a heavy topic. There's a lot of gravity around the matter. And I think I want to start by putting our listeners at ease that the work that you're doing, while of course, clinically sound based on your credentials and your education, of course, but this is a Torah community that we're addressing here.
Sure.
And, we had Rabbi Shais Taub on the podcast. And he sometimes takes exception. He takes offense. He's like, people are like surprised to learn that I'm not a therapist and I'm not a clinician. And as if like all of this wisdom can't come straight from the Torah. Like that's what he has to sort of dispel and disclaim. With you, it's interesting because you are clinically credentialed. And of course you operate professionally and you have a practice and you are grounded in that world. But at the same time, I want to make sure we're letting our listeners know that everything that you're doing and everything that you're publishing is done with the endorsement and the Das Torah of our Gedolim. And I want to give you an opportunity to start there, to know that whatever we're going to discuss is coming straight from the Koslei Beis Medrash as well, coupled with your professional credentials.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. And for all the work that you do on behalf of Klal Yisrael. And I'm glad you're starting that way because the book was a 4-year project, 2 of which were strictly involved getting the Gedolim on board, much more than on board. There are thousands and thousands of edits, and I have Ksav Yad of Gedolim correcting even my commas. That's the level of detail that the Gedolim were involved in this book. And Aaron Feldman Shlita not only gave Askama, but wrote the forward to the book and had a bit of a concern that you're raising that because there's so much hashkafa in it, that he wanted that there should be a joint effort with a Shiva or Mashgiach. And that was why he actually ended up writing the forward, is he wanted to send a message that this is from entirely Torah perspective. And Baruch Hashem, we had Reb Shmuel Kamenetsky Shlita and Rav Elia Brudny, Reb Shalom Kamenetsky, Rav Yaakov Bender, and many others from the Torah world who gave haskamas, but they were very, very thoroughly involved at that level. And the hope is that this is really not in any way just a psychological message, but it is totally embedded in the Torah world and in Torah philosophy, but also includes cutting-edge psychological knowledge and research.
Gewalt.
Yeah.
Right?
I should have said that.
I was actually waiting. I was giving you an opportunity to.
I'm off my game, Bauman.
Erroneous.
It's really interesting. That's
as Nachi looks at the book.
No, I think it's a super important topic. One which, like Momo mentioned, probably isn't an easy task to speak about and write about for just the general audiences, but it's one that needs to be heard and needs to be told. So that we're excited to be doing this.
So to jump back in there, it's been a very interesting journey, because the truth of the matter is we talk about today as if with pornography and the internet and all the issues that we're bombarded with, but Chaz Hashem, I've had the opportunity now to speak to hundreds, probably thousands of people at this point about this topic. And before I even talk about the internet, I take people just back, and we could do it here for a moment.
Let's
if you guys
do it.
are comfortable.
Take us back.
close your eyes for a
We're here
moment.
to just give you a voice and a
we're
platform.
we're closing our eyes again.
Close your eyes.
Remember
Yeah.
we did
here
this
we go.
last time?
Therapy stuff.
Jonathan Feiner.
Last time we did it with Jonathan Feiner, and Momo licked my face. It was,
Erroneous.
Gewalt.
That's the negative one. Yeah.
So
okay,
just,
you keep your eyes open. Just keep your-
I do a lot of abuse prevention work, so Mom behave. Just close your eyes for a minute and go back to time when you were first exposed to any information about sexuality or the topic and first had curiosity. Go back and think about what that was like, your first exposure to it. And then moving along from there, go up to when you started to, right before you entered puberty or started to have thoughts or feelings, your body was changing, your thoughts and feelings were changing, there started to be attractions, and what that time of your life was like for you, what you experienced. Was it very pleasant? Was it calm, peaceful? Was it anxious? Was it scary? Was it confusing? What was it? And if any of you don't mind sharing with your audience, anyone want to share what that was like?
Should I open my
You can
eyes?
open your
Oh,
eyes
okay.
now, Mama. He's
Oh,
out.
Yeah.
I may have drifted off for a moment. No, I actually did a 7-minute meditation before starting
Wow.
this. Yeah, because this is studio day. So this is the 3rd episode of today.
Yeah.
So I did a run, a swim, and a meditation before this episode.
Okay, we talk about self.
I had some donuts.
but we don't do any of that. So yeah,
Had a few
wow, I'm
munch-
inspired.
Had a few munchkins. A few too many. So what's that's very interesting. What's the general response that you usually get when you do that?
That's not really passing on your offer, by the way.
I got it. I'm quick like that. So, many people pass on the offer, and it's okay. But then when they try to pass, so I just say, and I do this to a large crowd usually, so it's more comfortable. And I say, if anybody had that was really pleasant, calm, peaceful, you felt really good about yourself, about your body, about your thoughts and feelings and urges, and then the svarim you read or whatever guidance you got really bolstered your self-worth and your connection to the Eibishter, raise your hand. And it's exactly what happens. Smiles, uncomfortable looks around, and I've done this now for thousands of people, and only one guy raised his hand, and he honestly gave me the creeps. So well before the internet, this has been a very challenging time for youth. And if you ask most people, besides for infancy, when do kids have the biggest struggles and the biggest challenges, and they need the most guidance? Most people will say right before puberty and during puberty. And what do we tend to do? We close our eyes and say, I'll walk you down to the chuppah. See you then.
Yeah.
We bounce. And so before we even get to today,
Yeah.
we're really talking about the need to show up as parents and as adults and as mechanchim to help people through the most tumultuous times of their lives. And why not do that with guidance? And then the second half, and I'll skip it here, is what would have been helpful to you at that time? What messages, what support, what kind of themes would you have wanted to hear that would have made it a better time in your life? And inevitably, everybody says, hey, first of all, just somebody letting me know what is going to happen to me, that it's normal, that I'm okay, that my thoughts and feelings and drives are normal, that the changes that are normal, that my struggles are normal, and that there's somebody to talk to. It's not this black hole and I'm left to deal with this all alone. And we know that the first time the Torah mentions anything, it's a template. And the template is loy toy ve'yosadim levadei, that sense of being alone in the world with my own thoughts, with my own feelings, nobody to turn to. And nobody had to announce that there's nobody to turn to. We just all got the memo. We just don't go there. And sadly, the only time people went there was when they were really, really struggling and banged up already. And so before we even get to today's day and age, I think there was a tremendous need for this. And now with the level of exposure and what kids will find and see and what they'll be sharing, I think that's where, the Gedolim said, okay, enough is enough.
So there's a shift, and I want to highlight that shift, I think, culturally, which is, and you did invite us to share, that resonates with my own life's experience. I was taken to summer camp when you invited me to close my eyes, and what I'm remembering is that there seemed to be some kids that like somehow knew what was going on, and like somehow they like had some kind of social power where people would be like gravitating to become educated, and that felt like weird. right?
Sure.
And what I'm hearing from you is that the Gedolim are inviting us culturally to shift away from letting kids get their education socially and from their friends and from like the one kid that seems to know what's going on, but who really knows what he knows and how accurate it is. The shift is let's proactively educate. And I'm sort of curious, I guess it's a little historical curiosity,
Right.
but Klal Yisrael historically didn't do that. And I'm wondering like what the Gedolim are sharing with the professionals that are really leading this charge that is driving this shift to not let things just be the way they've always been, but rather let's proactively engage our kids with this.
So I'm not much of a historian at all, but that's an interesting phenomenon in its own right because the Torah is very open. If a kid knows Chumash and Rashi
Right.
properly teiched, he knows the translation in the real way.
Do you mean Miss Sarah?
He knows whatever it is, right? Meaning,
Right.
so in terms of there wasn't necessarily a Messiah of going proactively to talk
Right.
about that. Now that's unclear. At what point did things shift that kids either didn't know how to translate or were given these more euphemisms? And if you go back to the Gedolim in Europe, some of them were taking faheres on Gemaras in Nida by their bar mitzvah. So it's unclear, was there a time where there was this ban on the knowledge? So many of the Gedolim say we don't have a sense that ignorance is innocence. Wow, you're such an Amaretz, you don't know Chumash Rashi, you don't know Mishnayos or Gemara, you're pure. So that's one step that's unclear. Certainly we know Revolba and the Chavetz Chaim and others did do some education, Revelia Plian, more so. There were already Gedolim beforehand, not as early, not as explicit. And I think what the pivot is not so much, wow, this is a big change fundamentally, is that the ages and the openness has to be ramped up to correspond to the exposure and the risks and the danger that's outside. And that's been, so this transitional space where it's not so much a radical shift, but it's a continuation of where things have been headed and the need to meet the needs of the Messiah. When I did this actually with Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson, and I asked him that, we say Chodesh Asur Min HaTorah, this is a new thing. He said the only chance we have of actually continuing the Messiah is if we meet the needs of the people and give them over the Torah's Messiah on this. Because like you said, it's not just that they're going to find out from kids. They're not finding it out in a tznius way, in a healthy way, from an adult source, from a Torah's perspective. Their first imprint on this whole topic is usually in some shame, toxic, guilt-induced, unhealthy framework that's certainly not the Torah's value system. And then we're trying to clean up and sort of fix this. It's very, very difficult to do.
Right. And the point that you stated very concisely is that historically, kids weren't getting the type of exposure that they're getting today. And whether we take this approach or not, our children are getting exposure at a unprecedentedly early age. And I've listened to a number of your talks. I think you're doing incredible work. Ashrecha, mamish.
Thank you.
And what I've learned from you is that our best shot is not at reacting to our children's exposure, but rather to educate them from a Torah perspective from the start. And because of how early their exposure is today, like we just have to start early.
Right. So I think that's crucial. But there's a piece here. People get stuck. How young, how old, how open, how close. And I'm not coming and say it's Zimmerman's way or the highway. If I care, you need to be comfortable in your approach, with your language, with your child, and with your das Torah. That's first and foremost. But what I emphasize a lot is it's not the content, it's the connection. Mm-hmm. The kids have to have a sense that there are adults in their lives that they can turn to with this. So many kids are dealing with a world but they have a sense, I can't go to anybody about this. It's bad, it's taboo, there's something. So that message that we're here and we can actually help you deal with what your real life is, not this fairy tale land that we say, we filtered our phones and, we're machanecha kodesh and everything's great. But no, that's not the experience of the children. The children are going to be struggling. And what is our job as parents and mechanchim if it's not to be there for children when they need us the most. And absolutely, we know from Chazal that it's a lot easier to do something on blank paper, as Chazal give the mashal to something that's been written all over. So if somebody gets an imprint from negativity and toxicity, and then you're trying to say, no, but the Torah has a whole different perspective on it. First of all, you don't even know that they're going to come to you. Secondly, you don't know what they've been through already before they come to you. And thirdly, what's the milah of that? If there's nothing inherently bad about the information, the Torah could talk about it explicitly. And I say, Mincha Yom Kippur, the last Kriyas Torah before Ne'ilah. We would think we would pick the most inspiring topics to talk about going to the Beis HaMikdash or something like that. And we read the Arayas. And you end off with Mishkav Zachar and Mishkav Behema, and then into Ne'ilah.
Hashem Aleichem.
Because that's Torah. Uplifting the physical. Knowing that you're made with a tremendous Yetzer Hara, that you're going to struggle, that you're going to falter, that there's tremendous risks out there, but we have a Torah path, there's a beautiful path, there's a Kedusha path. That's the whole message of the Torah. So it's not something that we have to put away in like a brown paper bag somewhere. It has to be done b'tznius. It has to be done in the right way with the right information. But the Torah is very, very open about this and has tremendous guidance for our children today. And if we don't provide it, somebody else will.
It's interesting because there's a lot. We just had Tu B'Av, right? And my father remarked to me the other day. He said, the Tu B'Av is one of the happiest days of the year, and all the men and the women would go and they would dance. They would dance about outside in the courtyard, and that's how shidduchim were made. And nowadays, it's not acceptable. Nowadays, it's like you go to a shidduch event. There's guys. You go to a shidduch event tomorrow night. There's girls, and they're separate. And some things are man-made problems. Do you think in this area we've strayed from the way it's supposed to be, the way that the Torah was given to us, and we just made these obstacles that are not necessary?
So I don't feel that I have the credentials to weigh in on what the Gedolim in previous generations were thinking,
right,
or what their cheshbon was. It's totally out of my ballpark. I do see clearly that the Torah has a way to communicate tremendous values about these topics. There's a tremendous emphasis on these topics throughout much of Torah. It's talked about in different ways. The Masechtas that we learn with children involve Nashim. So these whole idea of when it sort of shifted and it became taboo and we don't even translate it correctly, I don't know where that came from, or what was that an intentional shift to solve a problem they had then, or was it, like you said, some sort of man-made problem? I'm not a historian. You could bring Rebbe Beryl Wein back on and ask him. He probably is the best man to answer that. But I do think that some of this, at least at the lay person level, isn't such a, wow, we're so tsunua and we're so dahaibin that we can't even bring ourselves to have these conversations. I think is that a lot of adults have so much discomfort around it because they went through those experiences themselves, because they have so much shame and guilt and confusion, and they don't have any clear models on this from their yeshivas or their Beis Yaakovs, that they're frozen. So it's not so much a, wow, it's such a sneeze thing. It's they're lost and confused in their own feelings, and they're afraid to transmit their baggage. At the same time, they don't know what to say. And I think that's why the response to this has been so overwhelming. People around the world are saying, oh, wow, there's finally something I know how to say, and it's good, it's Torah-dic, and it's healthy. Please, and they please get a girl's version, please, so like, I think there's been a thirst because people have been waiting. Parents want to show up. We spend our lives being there for our kids. We want to show up for our children. We don't want to leave them hanging when we know in the back of our minds they're going to have real struggles. But we've been sort of forced on the sidelines because we don't know what to do and we're very uncomfortable. And that's what I'm hoping to really change.
So let's hold that parent's hand for a moment as they are gripped with that discomfort.
Yeah.
Where it sounds like intellectually sound and like, okay, I buy it. Like it makes sense to me. But the distance, of course, from the mind to the heart is very, very far.
Right.
And like from intellectual acceptance to emotional acceptance and like willingness to actually do something, that's a road, right?
Sure.
So how do we empower parents that are feeling that discomfort?
Like we tend to do with all feelings, it's just okay that you
ignore
have
them. Put them in the closet. Lock the door.
You notice them. You embrace them and say, okay, I'm feeling uncomfortable. I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling confused, whatever it might be. I'm feeling shame or guilt. And yet what we try to get people to do ultimately is say, those are my thoughts or feelings, but I don't have to act from that place. I can sort of be bigger. I can be more courageous. I can be more bold. I could show up. And you don't even have to hide. People could say, to their kid, it's a little bit uncomfortable for me. I don't necessarily have clear guidance on this. It's a sensitive topic. I'm a little uncomfortable. You'll probably be uncomfortable. Let's do this together. So rather than pretending that it doesn't bother us at all, or like you said, just pushing the feelings away, or because of those feelings say, I don't know, somebody else is going to do it. I don't know, I did it without it. And, my parents didn't talk to me, so I'm not going to do anything, and just hope for the best. I think we can encourage people to be bigger. And I think every time you try to help raise people up, you'd be surprised how many times they'll meet it. And what's fascinating for me is that the mothers are almost always more ready to do this. And dads, like as macho and bravado as they are, they like bail. And it's been a very hard task to get, like you said, dads, like they all agree in concept, but then it's like, okay, so when are you having it? No, I don't know, soon, after camp, next, I don't know. And to get them to say, and that's why I felt the need to bring people back to their experience, because we get into this intellectual space, I don't know, this, that, and I just have them go back to their experience and say to them, do you want your child to have even the same experience as yours, let alone potentially something much worse? And many of them will just say, okay, I'm going to go do it.
Well, I guess what's the alternative to what you're, bringing up and mentioning here? I guess that's also a good impetus or a good incentive for parents to say, hey, yeah, I'm going to get on board with this, because the alternative can be...
Right. So I don't like to use fear as a motivation. It's very powerful, but I like to motivate people in a much more positive way. I tried, instead of waiting to hold their hand in the chuppah after they've been through 10, 15 years of difficult emotions, you can hold their hand along the way. You can be there as a parent. And what's been super cool about this is overwhelmingly, any parent that's actually shown up and done it will come back and say, wait, the conversation went much easier than I expected. Or they'll say, you know what, my whole relationship with my kid changed. They opened much more up to me about bullying, about an abuse issue, about a teacher that they were having difficulty with. Why? Because instead of the kids feeling subconsciously, my parents, they talk about things at the Shabbos table, very high level stuff, but they're checked out of my life. They have no clue what's actually going on. When parents say, I'm going to get into the mud, I'm going to get into what your real life experience is, what it's like to live in 2023 with you, and be open that that's normal and real and we could talk about it. Kids reflect that and they open back up to the parents, and the whole dynamic shifts. And so for me, the biggest impetus is you can show up. You're spending your whole life trying to be there for your family, for your children. Yes, it'll be uncomfortable for 10 minutes. So it's like, let's go. Be bigger. Be there. And what do you model for your kids when you show up versus you don't? When you don't show up, you model, my parents are small, and kids pick up. They talk the talk, but when it comes to uncomfortable things, there's nobody home. And that's how the previous generation put up a sign on their table, do never talk to us about Inyane Kedusha, right? It's never happened. But everybody got the memo, because you give off energies as to what you're open to. And when kids sense, my parents can talk about anything. I can go to them with any problem on earth and they'll be there. And they're going to give me truth, and they're going to give me good guidance, and they get, more importantly than the guidance, they're there as my emotional rock. Kids respond. And that's what every parent deeply wants. So it's sort of, you have the, messages, you have the words, you need to use the book while you're doing it. Even I use the book when I do it with my kids. Go ahead, use the book and jump in and do it.
Gewalt. So I love how you, that was, by the way, that wasn't intentional.
It was a negative
That
one
was,
or a
no, that
positive
was
one?
knee jerk.
Okay.
That was a natural Gewalt exclaim.
Get a lot of emails. We'll be right back to this episode of the Meaningful People podcast with Dr. Shloimie Zimmerman. And if you clicked on this episode and you're listening, you're interested in mental health, you're interested in that field, that area, and this is a perfect advertiser. This is okclarity.com. okclarity.com is like an upscale version of ZocDoc for the Jewish world. It's the place for any Jew to find a top-notch therapist, psychiatrist, nutritionist, or coach, and it's completely free to use. Every single professional on okclarity.com is vetted and experienced in working with the Jewish community, so they understand the anxiety you might be facing at this time of year, and the anxiety we face every time of the year, for that matter. It's true. If you're Jewish, you have anxiety. It's no doubt about that. What I love about okclarity.com is the platform is so easy to use. You can search and filter to find the best professional that you're looking for. They have dozens of providers who take insurance, and you can watch an intro video of each professional to get a better sense of who they are before taking the first step and reaching out to them, which I get, it's a hard step to take, to reach out to a therapist or a coach or psychiatrist, but it's so worth it, and you'll thank yourself later for doing that. And if this sounds overwhelming to you, they offer a short form for you to complete. Their specialist will recommend a great professional for you, all anonymous and free. I mean, you fill out that form and they say, hey, by the way, I think this professional might be the best one for you. It's incredible. Also, I was just told that they have an Instagram live session every weeknight where different experts discuss pressing mental health and wellness topics and answer community questions anonymously and for free. So if you're not already following OK Clarity on Instagram, you definitely want to. Last but not least, if you have WhatsApp, OK Clarity has an incredible WhatsApp status with over 8,000 obsessed followers. And yes, I am one of them. Side note, if you're listening to this and you are a wellness professional and you're not already on okclarity.com, here's your friendly reminder that it is the place if you want to stay relevant and help the people who need you. This is the place that people are going to find those professionals, and they will find you on okclarity.com. So we'll put the links to their website and WhatsApp in the show notes of this episode. Smash those links. You won't regret it. And I hope you enjoy the rest of this episode.
I love how you framed that obviously people have different backgrounds and they have different, even within from Yiddishkeit, there's different cultures. There's Orthodox and modern Orthodox and different vernacular and different nusach, different language. And I love how you make space for that. You're not like scripting the meeting and the discussion, but if you can maybe set some parameters and guidelines so that everyone in their own nusach, in their own vernacular, can follow sort of these guidelines for how to go there with your children.
Right. So the actual points, because they involve intimacy, I think are a little bit less appropriate for just a public, podcast that, Baksham is very much a family show. But the idea is that you want to be conveying, we could talk about this, I'm here, versus like if you're turning purple and hiding behind the book, I don't care what you say and what nusach you use, the kids are going to pick up, oh my gosh, this is something crazy.
And that could lead to a lot of meaning about anything. It could be chas v'shalom, a kid is experiencing abuse or experiencing anything and it just doesn't feel comfortable.
100%. So one of the most important things is that even if you're sort of uncomfortable, when you show that, I'm uncomfortable, I'm being courageous and I'm being calm and I'm not running through this like, okay, I got to get through the talk and get out of here. But I'm opening up dialogue and I'm listening to my child respond and seeing their body language and say, okay, do they get it? Do they feel more comfortable? I'm checking for comprehension. Do they understand me? That's the most important thing. That whichever language, whether you're using just Lashon HaTorah or you're using secular terms or you're being, very open or a little bit more closed off, that you're conveying, I'm here, I'm calm, I'm inviting you to have any questions, comments. I'm inviting you to know I'm with you and you're safe, you're normal, you're healthy, and we're good. And this is an experience you don't have to go through alone. That sort of energy, that sort of nonverbal communication is much more important than any of the exact words you're going to say. That being said, because people say, okay, there are words, there are scripts. I'm not scripting it for you. I want you to take that and then customize it for yourself and use it in how you do. But I do want to give parents the ability to say, okay, here's the crucial points. And there's both the actual sort of conversation pieces, and for people who are really more comfortable or want chazara, there's like a summary page. Eli Bruni told me nobody reads today. You need to have it in a one-page thing. So there's actually like a fold-out 2-page summary, bullet point, crash course.
Please write the whole book, but then summarize it for me so I don't have to read it.
Right.
Like those Asher Yatzar cards when you come out of the bathroom.
Right. So there is that for those of you who there's no way you're reading it. So, check out the summary page.
Like in the front seat of an airplane.
Sure.
The whatever. Instructions how to. Very good. You've been doing this for quite a while. I remember seeing you speak by Amudim. I think by Kesher Nafshi.
Yeah.
But for quite a while, I'm curious where you think over the years you've seen a lot of change. Where are things heading? The challenges, I imagine, have become far more challenging, and it puts us in a more vulnerable situation with ourselves, with our kids. Just from your professional perspective, what have you seen, and where do you think this is going?
So that's actually a very difficult issue. Quite honestly, for quite a number of years, I sort of blocked out some of that because, you come out, you spend so much of your life's time and energy, and becoming a professional at a doctoral level takes forever.
Yeah.
And you just want to go out and change the world. And Baruch Hashem, on the one-on-one level and with a therapy client, you often see tremendous things happen, in some ways miraculous. Like, how does talking to somebody take them from there to a whole different life? And it's unbelievable to experience that. It takes months and years many times, but you see that. But one of the hardest things for me is that collectively, almost all things are trending in the wrong direction. So, and the data, this is in the secular world, is in the US in particular, actually since the Great Depression, World War II, and even the turbulent 60s and 70s, using the same metrics, we have more anxiety, more depression, more suicidality, less happiness in the US. So one of the things that's been deeply troubling to me is that piece of it. And in some ways, we've done all this awareness, and psychologists talked about every platform, every Jewish publication, even the most Hasidic publications are dealing with mental health, and mental health is everywhere. And we've made a tremendous amount of changes, but that's not leading to a more broadly healthy society. And
this is not just reporting bias.
No, this is actual. We like the other way. We like to think, no, we as psychologists, we have a bias to say we changed the world. We brought psychology to the masses, right, and now everybody's doing better. Halavai, I could be on this podcast saying we got out there, chevra, and we crushed it. No, everyone's bias would be the other way. All the people who are doing this research would love to find that they dramatically improve the world positively, and that's just not the case. And it's a part that actually within the psychological community, you almost don't hear anything about it. Or it's like just double down and triple down. No, more awareness and more openness and more affirming care,
Yeah.
And I think that we've been losing and something you guys deal with a lot is the spiritual side, a core value system in a healthy religion, a healthy Torah perspective, healthy Hasidus, Musar. I think we've moved more and more away from God and higher level values, even democracy, freedom. People used to be involved in things that were much bigger than themselves. And we've turned the focus extraordinarily to the individual and how they feel. And we went from post-Holocaust generation, this is, my conjecture, that was, okay, we shut down feelings for a while and we had to rebuild. But now we have feelings worship, and everything is how I feel in the moment. Am I happy? Is this doing well for me? And we're losing sight of why we're really here, and that humans can be bigger. And we're here not for our own ego and for our own happiness, but to serve something much bigger than ourselves, to serve others, to serve Hashem. And
People forget that on the money, it's printed, "In God we trust."
Right. We've moved so far away from that. Nietzsche described way back, God is dead, but we, put him in a box and called it, barbaric and outdated and causing all the psychological issues. And I think we need to find a way back to ideals, towards values, towards living beyond ourselves. And as Torah Jews, I think we need a Torah that's much more integrated into real life experience. It's not just a sugya that's distant. It has to be in my kishkis, as we would say, in the guts, in how I live and breathe, and to give kids a sense that they're part of something much bigger and they're living for something much bigger. Because the saddest thing is the more you focus on yourself and your happiness, the more miserable you get. And so while I do think there's certain areas, you actually mentioned abuse, I think in the frum world, one thing that we did tremendously on the good note is we did a tremendous amount of abuse prevention work and policy and procedure. And one thing that we're seeing a real decline in is institutional-based abuse. So like in camps or schools or yeshivas or shuls, we're seeing tremendous reduction.
What about domestically?
Domestically is still very problematic. That's the hardest area for us to deal with. And domestically, going back to this whole topic we're at hand, the whole Kiddush issues, what we see is a tremendous amount of young kids, we have higher levels of abuse by other children than even the secular world. So kids 18 or under acting out with a sibling or a cousin 3 or more years younger than them.
So you say it again. We have
higher rates of children abusing other children. And we suspect it's because we have larger families and we have a tremendous emphasis on family life. Shabbosim, Yom Tovim, and those are a lot of unsupervised times.
Or a Pesach, yeah.
We also have no education plus kids getting exposed. So a lot of kids, especially boys, are practicing what they heard or saw.
And gender segregation.
And on somebody they have access to, typically a younger sister or cousin. And that we see a tremendous amount of, and that's something we really need to step up. And the same thing, our abuse prevention efforts, Debbie Fox's Safety Kit program went through 4th grade. Why? Because then we got stuck as to what could we say, what could we not say. And so part of, my book is much more global than that, but it has a dedicated chapter to that. And the whole appendix is abuse prevention that I use community-wide, because we're really trying to lower those rates tremendously. And if we don't articulate ourselves and we don't teach the kids and we don't become more aware ourselves and how we need to supervise, we don't have a chance of that. But if we do, we saw that we could really help this by globally getting people more aware and parents more aware. We saw tremendous reductions. So I think Mietz Hashem will be able to see the same thing here.
Do you think that we can call it, is it called dysfunction in that area, where we have a little bit of dysfunction, where the statistics in our community of 18 and under treating others is not great? Do you think that leads to maybe a divorce rate that's not something any of us are proud of? Of course, society divorce rate is perhaps higher, but
right. So it's a very good question. I wish I had a great answer to it. It's unclear because in the secular world, they have enormously high rates of other things, STDs, teen pregnancies, acting out in a whole different way, and certainly so they have mega issues in other places, and their divorce rates are through the roof. We certainly know that kids who, before they even, let's say we talk about abuse, but if a kid is going to feel a tremendous amount of unhealthy guilt, or toxic shame, he feels badly about himself, he feels that he's been a terrible, boy or girl for all these years, and, this is just a horrible thing, and he's going to burn in Gehenna for it. And then, 2 days before his chasana, somebody says, no, it's really beautiful and amazing, and he goes into marriage like that. Yeah, there's going to be problems.
Do you find that there has been a lot of, in with your counseling, do you find that there's been a lot of issues in that area that's Shona Rishona?
Yeah, meaning all sorts of things between abuse and traumas and what people have been educated and what they're expecting in marriage. And again, we talk about values where they're looking for, hey, this is supposed to be like what I'm seeing on the screen, and then it has nothing to do with that whatsoever. And there's a lot of tensions, a lot of frustrations, a lot of confusion, and again, so little guidance, so little preemption. So I think we have to step up our game on this enormously, both at the pre-puberty through puberty level, and then pre-marriage level on a whole different level.
I've heard you illustrate beautifully the zeh le'uma zeh concept, which I think is very helpful for people that are trying to reconcile the shame that they experience when they're younger, trying to avoid certain behaviors, while when they get their chassan shmuz or when they get their kala classes, they're being taught that this is the most beautiful thing in the world. And how do they reconcile that?
So, I think, again, we need to do a much better job of that, because I think that they have to realize your drives are 100% normal. Hashem made them for you. Hashem made you have drives that are totally in opposition to the Torah. You're going to want to do what you're going to lie. You want to lie and cheat and steal. And then in terms of, all right, you're going to want to be and interact and touch and think about members of the opposite gender that you're not allowed to. And that is not only normal, that's okay, and that's by design. And now you haven't, it's not that, oh, wow, you're terrible for having these thoughts or feelings or even these failings. You're fighting the battle that is extraordinarily unique. Who is fighting the battle of Kedusha, trying to be holy? Who's trying to watch their eyes? Which teenagers alive today are trying to not look at inappropriate material, not be involved in that, and turn themselves away to Torah and davening and friendship and connection? we have, instead of making kids feel terribly, we should make kids feel like heroes. We should make kids feel amazing. And the zelu mazeh that you're bringing out is because the husband-wife is really a mushal for Avas Hashem, for the deepest connection. We just, had Tisha B'Av where the Kruvim were Ma'urin Zeh B'Zeh. They were embraced as husband and wife, was the symbolism of our connection and closeness with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that intimacy, that sanctity, that beauty of bond, of connection, of sharing, of das, of chibur, all of these things. So that is the highest levels that a human can achieve. So the opposite of that, and whether you're, in Klippa and Hasidus world or Yetzer Hara in the Litvish or however you want to view that, the opposite of that and defiling and being involved in just selfishness and taking advantage of that just for pure indulgence and lust and objectification and disconnection is going to be related to very negative things. But if you're struggling with that, which you're going to, if you're a healthy, normal person, you're going to have mighty struggles with this. That struggle is beautiful. The struggle is why you're here. It's not like a mistake. Oh, really? You're supposed to just be learning and davening and you have got hit by some bomb from left field. No, this is supposed to be one of the greatest challenges of your life. And if you're battling with it, we should put you on our shoulders and dance around like Yosef Atzadik. And that's the beauty. And that's what I think we can do a much better job of, not just be in the shadows. Hey, celebrate who you are and what you're doing as a Yid who's trying to do the right thing by the Torah.
We'll be right back to this episode of the Meaningful People podcast. But first, a few words from our friend at Genesis Israel. What is Genesis Israel? Genesis Israel is a mental health and addiction clinic geared towards the unique needs of the English-speaking community in Israel. They offer expert evidence-based and compassionate treatment. One of the professionals, part of Genesis Israel, the vice president, Menachem Poznansky. So he's involved with Genesis Israel. If you like that episode, you'll definitely appreciate what they do. So they're a mental health and addiction clinic. They really are in Israel and they're geared towards the unique needs of the English-speaking community. They are really pioneering the Jerusalem model, a multidisciplinary outpatient clinic with an adaptive residential component, which allows for personalized and specialized treatment at a fraction of the usual cost. So what does their program include? You're thinking, what does Genesis Israel really offer? Well, that's residential substance abuse program, outpatient mental health clinic, dedicated gap year support program for seminary, yeshiva, and gap year students. So to get in touch with Genesis Israel, you need to reach out to their admission specialist today. If you're in the U.S., you can call 561-427-7775. Or if you're in Israel, it's 09-376-1555. Or you could just go to genesisisrael.com. That is genesisisrael.com. They really might be helpful to you, so make sure to reach out to them. And now back to this episode.
And just to bring the Zelu Mazeh point home, because I think it's so beautiful, it's not a coincidence that the darkness that is at the other end of these failings is so dark, specifically because of the capacity for this inyan. This inyan has such capacity that it can facilitate connection. And as you're mentioning, ultimately between Knesset Yisrael and the Shechina, so that yichud that's possible, that intimacy that our neshama can have with its source, with its creator, that has to have that capacity. And therefore, when it's unleashed to the Sidra Achra, when it's unleashed to the Yetzer Hara, when it's unleashed to the failure of it, of course it's gonna be very dark.
Right. So I think there's something that's innate, and that's why Adam and Chava covered themselves up, even though they didn't do a sexual avera, but their sense of that, whoa, now I'm capable for that darkness and that dark side and that Sitra Acher side immediately led them to cover that. But I think as Nachi was talking about, I think there's a man-made problem here that we're actually joining with the Sitra Acher. What does the Sitra Acher want is more than you to do an Avera, is for you to feel terribly about yourself, to feel distance from Hashem. You're a Ben Torah, look what you looked at. You're a Bas Yisrael, come on, this is what you're thinking about, this is what you were involved in. That's what his goal is, to make you feel disconnected, to make you feel lowly, to make you feel like an animal, to make you feel perverse. And humans have been helping that message by sometimes just by the sheer silence. This is the one area we can't go there, so you end up feeling terrible. So there's a part that's innate by the lowliness or the klippa, and then there's a part that we've joined forces with the Sitra Acher to make kids feel like that. And then we need this huge sort of movements of, hey, no, it's really, okay, why do we have to wait till they're addicted, till they're struggling, till they're so burnt by this, till they feel so lousy about themselves, and then we're going to be mechazik. Why not do this beforehand? And why not give them the truth?
The preemptive
100%.
But I think at this point, it's very important to highlight the distinction between normalizing the challenge and being permissive about the failure.
100%. 100%. I think that's our job. Is we're not going to whitewash or chas v'shalom edit the Torah. They're isurim, and you know what? Many times we flake on that too. They don't even know exactly what's mutter, what's usser, what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do, what they think is going to happen to them as a result. So we have to explain to them what the isurim are, and we don't say no, wink, wink. It's okay, chas v'shalom. We're not, condoning behavior, but at the same time, like we do in every other struggle with bittul Torah, with lashon hara, with chil Hashem, with getting frustrated, we help kids realize, okay, you struggle. Welcome to humanity, and you fell.
And this shouldn't be any different. But I understand what you're saying, because like in society, it is more of the permissive approach. And look where we are today. And I imagine it leads to more challenges in this area, where we're in a day and age where a man could be a woman could be a man, and hulu. Like, there's no more, this is this is that, this is that. Does that make things more challenging? If the conversation wasn't hard enough, what's out there compounds it even further.
So it was a very interesting piece, actually. One of the places that particularly Aaron Feldman really honed in on was, in the modern psychological research, Brene Brown is like, shame rock star.
Vulnerability.
Exactly. Vulnerability and shame, right? Yeah. So, but everything that in her shame work is basically how terrible shame is. And so I basically went along with that, calling shame this problematic thing. And then busha from the Torah, that, one of the 3 signs of the Jewish people is that by shanim we're shamefaced. And all of the, places that we talk about, Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai's bracha to Talmidim was that halavai, you have the shame of like when you see, other people will see you do averis, you should have that shame, between you and Hashem. Really? So shame is like put on this thing. So I said, okay, busha is not shame, a few, minor edits. And Aaron Feldman's like, sure seems like shame. He was having none of it. And I ended up doing a massive much deeper dive into both the psychological research as well as Torah sources on this. And we learned that really shame is just a pure feeling. It's this feeling that I want to turn away, I want to hide, I want to avert my gaze. I feel somewhat smaller. I want to avert myself, because I feel less than. Contract, exactly. Now, the question of that is, where's the source of that? So the toxic form of that is, you're a horrible human being. You should hide. If anybody knew what you were thinking, feeling, or doing, they would want nothing to do with you. So you're trying to shield yourself from that. In the Torah, it's the sense that, no, I'm really a beautiful soul. And when I acted not in accordance with that, I'm ashamed that was beneath me. I wasn't acting as my true self. I was acting as a lowly part of me. I was tapped into the, nefesh habahamis, if you want to call it.
You remove yourself from the sin and don't become the sin.
So I was less than. I wasn't living up to who I really am. So I wasn't living my authentic self. Toxic shame is I was living my authentic self. I'm a terrible person. That is one of the most catastrophic things. And that is what really Hasidus and good Musar is all about, is building you away from that. So the problem is that society is trying to do away with all shame on this topic. No, you should strut sexuality, you should put it out there, everything goes, and it is actually causing the destruction.
To the point of criminality in a way.
Absolutely. Not only, criminality and the part of what's going on the street, but now we're co-opting the mental health and medical fields to engage in surgeries for minors. I mean, things that are, to me, reprehensible. And, in the name of some giant compassionate and just free and clear, do whatever you want. And it's actually just going to destroy the fabric of society. And I think, we're trying to restore that healthy sense. Who you really are is something way beyond. And you have that sense. You have that sense when you lose your temper and you say, that wasn't me. Who was it? Right? You have a sense, I was out of touch with the authentic me. And the same thing when we feel like we just lusted. We just went after that animalistic piece. You feel, that's a healthy sense of shame that I was less than. But the idea that, no, I'm not a yeshiva bacher, I'm a pervert, I'm not a bas Yisrael, I'm some prutza, That's toxic shame. Anytime you're identifying yourself as bad, as negative, that's the Yetzer Hara, that's Sitra Acher. And that's where we need to really help restore actual healthy shame, because healthy shame is actually rooted in this pristine sense that you are a neshama, you're a chelek elokam mal.
Mamish.
Well, how do you make sure that line is walked properly and doesn't turn into someone doing awful things and being like, it wasn't me. Like, it wasn't me. No, it wasn't me. Bro, like you need a change. You can't keep saying it wasn't you. That could come across as weiter, it wasn't you, weiter.
Excellent. And I think that's one of the other ills and dangers in psychology, is sometimes it's used as a way to knock out bechir. You're just a product of your environment. You've just been traumatized. This is society is normal, etc. And you don't have a way to really be in charge and have to choose and have to be responsible. And I think sometimes we can fall into that. And some of the big Gedolim of the previous generations, Rav Wolbe, Rav Hutner Zatzal, were gravely concerned about the impact on psychology doing that, of making it, what do you want from me? This is society. This is how I program. This is what happened to me in my childhood. And so, of course, many times people in my clinical practice struggle with unhealthy guilt, unhealthy shame. They feel terrible about themselves when they shouldn't. It's disproportionate. It's incapacitating. It's toxic. But we have to be very careful that the flip side of that isn't, that just wasn't me.
Right.
The sense that, no, you can choose. You're responsible for your actions. You can be bigger. That is an imperative message that I think psychology sometimes goes away from. I think it's much more in the addiction world to be responsible, to own up, to make amends. And I think we need to put that much more front and center. Yeah. Just a very interesting point on that. I actually spoke about this at Kesher Nafshi, the last Kesher Nafshi. Viktor Frankl was famously, a psychiatrist during the Holocaust.
He was the real founder of Meaningful Minute, by the way.
That's right.
And Search for Meaningful Minute.
Should I pay him royalties? His family?
So, what was a fascinating incident that happened is that he went to a prison where the prisoners were all on death row. And
Gewalt.
That's a Gewalt. So, San Quentin prison. And normally where he would go, there would be 1,500, 2,000 people minimum. And he gets to the prison to speak to the inmates, and there's 3 people there. And one of them is the court, the prison reporter. And, he's trying to be a little bit of an honor. Do they know I'm here? Did they announce it? Did they send out the flyer? Like, what's going on?
It's hysterical.
And the prison reporter says, no, all the inmates know. But they're totally not interested, because every mental health professional that comes here comes and tells them that it's not their fault, that they come from messed up backgrounds and their parents messed them up and society messed them up, and really, it's just a whole thing is messed up and they shouldn't be here. And they're sick of it. And so Frankl did a fascinating move, and that actually is like a classically no-no in the psychology world, but we'll touch on that in a moment, because he asked, can I speak on the prison loudspeaker? And I said, you're Viktor Frankl. Speak on the prison loudspeaker. This guy's on death row, right? So he gets on, and this is the no. We usually don't say, I know exactly what you've been through, because you diminish a person's individual experience. But Frankl says, I also know what it's like to be on death row. So prison gets quiet. Like, what's this psychologist talking about? He's like, I was on death row just with no trial, just from pure hate. The Nazis took me because I'm Jewish and put me on death row. And I know what that feels like, to be wondering, when is it going to end? When is it all going to be over? When is everybody around me going to die? And he goes on to say, but even in those moments, even in the last moments, and you're not sure, if you have 1 minute or 1 day left to live, you can do something. Because you're a human being and you're responsible for your choices. So you can make amends. And even if you can't do it to your victim or their family, you can at least say inside, I acted beneath me in a terrible manner, and I'm responsible for that. He said, you as a human being have the privilege of being responsible for your actions, because otherwise you're just a pre-programmed, you're just an animal. The thing that makes you human is the fact that you have choice and that you can be responsible. Because if you're just programmed, you lose all of your humanity, and we all lose our humanity. And he said, so each of you find a way to make amends for what you did in any which way that you can. And that might even be to yourself, to say what we call charata, to feel badly and say, I really messed up and I'm going to meet my maker. And he said that was the most inspiring message they ever got in prison, period, by far. Ad kedei, that there was a movement that started in the prisons, that a lot of the prisoners wanted to give back in some way. We've done such destructive things. What could we do? We're locked away for life. So they wanted to give their organs. Can I give a kidney? Can I give a cornea? I want to help people. And there was a whole turmoil. Nobody was allowing them to do anything. They said, you're here because you want to rehabilitate us. Let us do something.
Correction
for hurting people. Let's help somebody live. And there was a big movement to do that. And part of his messaging was what really sparked that to a next level, because as human beings, we want to be responsible. Now, again, when you have too much responsibility and you become broken and you do it in an unhealthy way, that's toxic and you need help out of that. But to have no responsibility and to feel, I'm just a product of my environment, then you lose your humanity. And we see the kids today, so many of them have no sense of meaning, no sense of purpose, no sense of direction, no sense of responsibility. They're just waiting for, somebody give me, take care of me, make me feel happy, distract, and they're lost. And we need to charge them with a healthy, balanced sense. You are bigger, you are more, you are capable of choice, you're capable for responsibility. Of course, then you did something wrong, do charat and get rid of, don't go back there. Don't dwell on negativity. Don't dwell on the past, but don't say, it wasn't me. Say, hey, I lapsed. I fell into not being me, acting from that lower part of me. I'm going to transform that. How am I going to move forward? And that is the entirety, really, of the Torah's message. And that's really what we need to impart in a much more realistic way to the children in how they struggle. That might be with their anxiety, with their depression, with eating disorders. There's so much stuff. Wow. And you need to find, so many people say, I have bechira on everything. No, you don't. But you have bechira on something. If you're alive today, that means you have a place of choice. And I tell you, that choice for some people might be, am I not going to end my life today? That might be their bechir. And they're going to be celebrating that in Shemayim like they're celebrating the biggest gadol finishing Kol HaTorah Kula. Because that's your circle. So we all have to find the place. And we have to help people find that place. Where is it that you have your bechir? Where is that you could take one step forward today? So it's not that, I have responsibility for everything. It can be overwhelming. But I can find that place where I do have responsibility and I can make some effort, and then my life has actual meaning in this moment. Not when I heal, when I change, but today, right this minute, there's a meaning to my life. And the Rebbe, famously.
You pointed at me, yeah.
Because you're a token Chabadsker, right? To me, one of the most beautiful message I ever heard was that there was a big celebration of birthdays. Why? Because the Rebbe said your birthday is the day that Hashem's saying, my world is incomplete without you. So could there be something more meaningful that today, if Hashem woke me up, where's that meaning? But the person says, I'm an addict and I have an eating disorder and I'm depressed. I can barely get out of bed. There's some place where there's a missing puzzle piece in this huge jigsaw puzzle. You might have this tiny, very dark corner where it's to live or not. Whether it's, I'm going to push myself to eat. Whether it's, I'm going to push myself out of bed. I'm going to reach out to my sponsor and say, I'm really struggling. That might be it. But that brings light into the most dark places. And that might be the final piece we need to bring out the ultimate light.
So beautiful. I saw from Rabbi Dr. Akiva Tatz once in one of his books, he wrote that he was talking about this Nekudas HaBechira that you're talking about. And he wrote that for one person, depending on where they are in their life, their growth beyond their Nekudas HaBechira could be that when they rob this person on the street, they don't push them down. Like, that's the growth for that person. And that day, when the person assaults someone to take their money, to not knock them down, that's growth. And the next day is to not do that. And the next day is to grow beyond that. And it's such a beautiful idea. Like, knowing where your bechira is and what is within my realm of choice today, and how do I grow beyond that?
Right. But that is one of the hardest things for us as humans because we have very big egos. And so I might not like the idea that my bechira today is really low. So I'd rather almost beat myself up and say, no, I'm just not choosing properly.
I'm not showing up.
I'm not showing up. I flaked, rather than say, you know what my bechira is? Like you said, don't knock down.
Fail a little less.
Fail a little, right? Pick yourself up. Do one positive thing. And that's, if we help people realize the value of that and not to look outside themselves, not to look around, but what that person's doing and what we're celebrating and what we're putting out there. And, even this idea, in some ways, you want to use meaningful people in the right way. Are these the meaningful people, the guests, or is the message that every single person is meaningful? Find your place, and nobody might really know what your meaning is. That might be just between you and Hashem. That person who might be saying, you know what, today I chose not to murder myself, nobody will ever know. But that's the most meaningful thing maybe done on the planet today. And that, if people get into just being really raw and honest and authentic with themselves, where am I really holding? Then we could do this. But we have to be much more real and raw, authentic as adults to say, yeah, people struggle and there is darkness. And the darkness inside of you is unfathomable. As like you said, Zelu Mazeh, if the light is so great, then the dark is going to have to be brutally dark. And we don't like to talk about that. We like to cleanse it. No, there's just holiness and tzaddikim and tzidkanias, and we don't like to get in the mud. And from my perspective, I think it's a real disservice to the children when we don't give authentic, real messages that there is darkness and it is brutal. But that's why we're here. Now, can you shine a tiny little bit of light there?
We'll be right back to this episode. There's one more thing I want to tell you. By the way, first of all, thank you so much for listening to this podcast. And when you support our advertisers, whether it's okclarity.com, Alpert Associates, Collars & Co., you are helping this podcast continue. So use those promo codes. Make sure you reach out to these companies if they can be service to you. It really does help us here at Meaningful People. And speaking of helping us, we want to help you help us and help you. That's the riddle. Collars & Co. Yes, I'm wearing my Collars & Co. shirt right now. And as I'm getting ready for the Zman, getting back into yeshiva mode, I am ordering my shirts at collarsandco.com. And I'm using a different promo code, fellows. You know what promo code I'm using? Not Meaningful for 15% off. I'm going to use that maybe in a couple of weeks. But right now, I'm using promo code MMYeshiva for 20% off. Get those beautiful white shirts. It could be full button down. It could be 4 buttons, whatever you want. It's honestly, especially as we're going more into the fall and the winter, and kids might be wearing cardigans or sweaters. Those polos, those dress polos from Collars & Co. with the 4 buttons and the rest of the shirt feeling like a t-shirt, those are perfect. You want to sit there and shuckle over your Gemara for hours on end. You want to feel good doing it. And that's why you go to collarsandco.com. Use promo code MMYeshiva for 20% off any order over $150. Trust me, your kids will thank you. They'll come home from yeshiva and say, Mommy, thank you so much for ordering this Collars & Co shirt because I was able to steig a lot better than I was had I been wearing a potato starch American flag collar type shirt. Shkoyach. That was a really good description of a shirt you don't want to be wearing. You want to be wearing a shirt from collarsandco.com. So reach out to them on their website, collarsandco.com. Use promo code MMYeshiva, and you'll thank me later. And now back to this episode.
I want to take 2 of the points you made and maybe bring them together, where the normalization of the topic and of the struggle specifically can be the very mechanism that sort of unleashes the toxicity to shed away. Where I think I've heard you say that rarely do you get someone in your practice coming with this toxic shame around all the lashon hara that they're speaking.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that it's okay to speak lashon hara.
Right.
It's just a regular struggle of everyday life that people need to work on seeing the positive and not projecting their negativity on what they see.
Right.
That's the struggle of lashon hara, and we struggle with it. And it's okay, and it's not mutter.
Right. Exactly.
But it's also not toxic shame.
100%. Because that's why this is such a unique space. Because our thoughts and our fantasies and our behaviors around this are in private. We are the voice in our head, or the Sitra Acher, has a playground to play with like no other place. Lashon hara, I hear and see everywhere. talking by Chazar Sashatz, it says, Godel avonim minasoy. That's the lashon that Cain used. I can't bear my sin. Nobody's ever come to me, Dr. Zimmerman, I can't function. I'm in shame. I don't know what's going to be with me because I spoke during Chazar Sashatz. It yet to happen, right? I see a very sick clinical population at times, and it's never happened, right? Same thing with Bittul Torah. Chilul Hashem. Nobody's ever come. We made such a ruckus on the Chalamoy trip that I can't face myself or anybody. It's never happened once. Why? Because we see. So there's a beauty that we don't see, people's sexual behaviors and thoughts, and that's tznius we don't want to breach. But the risks of that is it's so easy for the Yetzer Hara to then say, no, but nobody's having those thoughts. Nobody's looking at what you're looking at. Nobody's done what you've done. And that's where it's such a dangerous place. And that's why the silence is so dangerous.
So what's the balance?
So the balance is healthy adults not going through every thought or fantasy that they have, but telling kids that thought that you have, that it's only you, that thing that, oh, you feel terrible, we preemptively say that's the Yetzer Hara. Everybody thinks that. That's the job of the Yetzer Hara. You're going to struggle. You're going to think it's only me. No, even with them, you're going to think, no, that they give the chizik. But if they knew for me, and we tell them specifically those messages, that's the job of the Yetzer Hara. And so now we're aligning that the force that is saying to you, you're innately bad, you're unworthy, there's no place for you. Hashem doesn't want you to go daven marav now, you just did that. That's all from the place of falsehood. That's all from the place of darkness. And we get them to say, go ahead. And then we say to them, and if there's any struggle, because I could show up, so then come talk to me about it. And then they can go through their individual challenge, and we can be there to empathically reflect, hey, it's okay, not that you've done it, but how are we going to move forward and not dwell on this? And then one of the beautiful things is that particularly the majority of Gedolim, both in the Hasidic and Litvischer world in the last 50 years for sure, have all basically given one message. Don't dwell in negativity on this. Don't dwell on it. Don't focus on it. Don't beat yourself up. Be even careful about the tshuva. They say, move forward. Be positive. Do something better the next time. Because the more you even think about this, the more involved you get. And that's really primarily why I wrote the book. Was Guard Your Eyes brought to me, there were other texts that talk about bullet points of sharing this with kids, but a lot of the materials about how to intervene or how to relate to struggle, that I thought were either very negative or sometimes just too involved. And I felt...
That was a quick little shout out to Guard Your Eyes, I heard.
Guard Your Eyes, not a little shout out. Big shout out to Guard Your Eyes. This really was their inspiration, their idea. They brought the template there. Their logo's on the back.
Nice.
And they're doing tremendous work. And they, they brought it to me. I ended up revamping the whole thing and, writing, the book. But this goes out to Guard Your Eyes same way. They were typically dealing with people on the back end after they struggled and were addicted and things like that. And they're trying to move to a prevention model. And, there's so much pain and so much dysfunction, so much disorders in our families and our mishpachas and moistus that can be avoided if we step up and go ahead and do prevention work. And there's again, we're not going to knock out the Yetzer Hara. We're not going to knock out the taivas, right? Chazal, after Avodah Zarah was davened to go away, the Gemara famously tells us they tried to get rid of sexual struggle, and the Navi warned them, you're going to destroy the world, whatever it means, that they were able to imprison it for 3 days. And even a chicken that had an egg inside of it wouldn't lay the egg. There was no more warmth or vitality in the world. There was no more functioning. So they said, you got to have it. And you can't have it halfway just to your spouse. It's going to be either full blown or nothing. And so we need it full blown. But the messaging could be, from the front end, you're going to have these, we're not going to cure it, but how much of the dysfunction, how many people who then fell into this toxic shame cycle, who ended up in their own heads, reading their own svarim without guidance, thinking that they're terrible, thinking that they're unique failures, could be avoided. Yeah. Right? It's untold.
It probably leads people who fall into the toxic shame. Like someone might be thinking, okay, so someone feels toxic shame. Okay, it ends there. It doesn't end there. It probably leads them to say, hey, listen, I'm already a piece of garbage. I'm going to go ahead and do this and this and this and this. And God forbid, God knows what.
100%. That is the number one gateway into full-blown acting out of all sorts,
toxic
including
shame.
Sexual and addictions.
Wow.
Is that falling into that spiral. And then exactly like you said, the Yitzhar gets you to say, and that's why he loves this, is because one aver, no problem. You feel like you're a piece of dirt anyway. Your Torah is fake. Your whole thing is a joke. So go, there's no safeguards anymore. There's no more healthy shame. Because instead of identifying as a beautiful, pristine neshama that had a lapse and distanced himself from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he says, no, you're a faker, you're a fraud, you're an imposter, so might as well just do anything anyway. And then you lose the entire safeguard.
I heard something once from my Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky, so sein gesund and stark. He said that people say that the Yetzer Hara wants you to do this and he loves this, referring to different tactics. And he told me, he said, Moshe Aaron, he said, the Yetzer Hara is a Malach Hashem Tzvakos. He doesn't want you to listen to him. His job is to present to you the other option. But it's like a mashal I was thinking, like the person whose job it is to put out the fertilizer, right? We know what fertilizer is made out of.
Right.
His job is to put all that out there. But really, it's just there to facilitate growth in the field.
100%. I think it's stunning because I've seen that in the Chassidish farm. It's nice to hear it from Reb Shmuel as well. But the idea being, a simpler mashal that I give is to, a sparring partner. Like if you're training to become a fighter, right? You get somebody who's going to throw punches and kicks at you, right? And now their job isn't to hurt you or knock you out. They're to train you to be the best you could be. Same thing, your personal trainer at the gym might, make you really struggle and you might even be in a lot of pain. But the goal isn't, okay, I'm there to hurt you. They're there to build your strength, build your muscles. The Yetzer Hara has one job, is to increase the struggle. I tell the kids, it's like a video game. As you get better, the enemy doesn't get easier, right? The opponent gets harder and harder and harder. Why? Because you're building your skill, building your talent. The goal is to build you into a human that you couldn't fathom and you can never become if the Yetzer Hara didn't challenge you. And again, why does a kid have to hear that after they feel like a failure, after they've fallen off the ledge and they feel miserable? And then it's not so easy to impart that message then either. I try to do that in my practice, and often it's incredibly difficult to heal those wounds once they're in place. Mm-hmm. But I think if we did this in advance and we get kids to know their Yetzer Hara as that force and we imparted that message very powerfully, who knows how much healthier and more connected to Hashem and themselves, to others, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu that they could be.
The epic battle between Yaakov Avinu and the Sar Shel Esav, which is the Satan, the Yetzer Hara, ends when Esav says, you got to let me go. It's my time to say Shira. Right? And it's like funny. It's like coincidental. Like, oh, Pink then, it was his Google Calendar went off. Like, oop, it's my slot. I got to go. Erroneous. The mission of the Sar Shel Esav is to present that challenge. And when Yaakov Avinu defeated the Sar Shel Esav and conquered him, and that's when Yaakov became Yisrael, by the way. Yisrael is Bigamatria Yaakov plus Satan. Because when you conquer something, it becomes part of that which conquers it. If America was to conquer Canada or Mexico, it would expand the scope of America. It would become part of it. So Yaakov conquered the Sar Shel Esav, became Yisrael. Yaakov plus Satan equals Yisrael. And now the Satan accomplished its mission. And therefore, specifically then, it was its time to say Shira because it did what it was supposed to do.
That's a beautiful idea. I have a very similar concept on that. The name Yisrael, when he got Yisrael, it's a footnote now that this is machlek, because the Litvisha say it in the name of Litvisha, the Chassidus say in the name of Chassidus. So it's Baruch Hashem that everyone wants a piece of. Yeah. But why we're called Yisrael? Because the pasuk says, Ki sarisa im alekim va'anoshim va'tucha, that you battled with divine beings and humans, and you overcame va'tucha, and you won. So again, I think if we were naming us, we would call ourselves B'nai Tuchal, winners, champs, right? We are the champions, right? So why on earth would we call us B'nai Yisrael, which means the challenge? So if you're the second place, if you lose, okay, got good fight, Chevra, right? But if you win, why not be called B'nai Tuchal? So they all tell us because the name talks about the essence. And our essence here, and our whole purpose here, is the struggle. And that's the fundamental difference. If kids knew, it's not that you just have to win. And okay, when you're going to defeat the Yetzer Hara and when he's going to go sing Shira, then you're good. No. Every day, day in, day out. Sarisa, you're battling with forces divine and human all day. You walk on the street, you're bittul Torah, everything is going at you from all sides, and you're battling and you're struggling. That's B'nai Yisrael. That's why we're called B'nai Yisrael, is because we're challenged and not B'nai Tuchal. And then ultimately, that's if we live that way, if we sense that our sense of meaning isn't in the Tuchal, isn't in the champion, but in that we struggle and we battle every day, that's who we are. Then ultimately, the Yetzer Hara will go sing shir because we'll have accomplished our goal.
And staying right there, going like shot for shot on these Vertlach. In that same epic battle, you mentioned the name is always indicative of the essence, right? Because Shmoy Kein Hu. And Yaakov Avinu says to the Sar Shalesav before he goes to sing shir, he says, "Tell me your name, Hagidi no Shemecha." And the Sar Shalesav responds, "Loma zeh tishal shmi." Well, what are you asking me my name for? Leave me alone. And on the surface, it's translated as a deflection. Right. Leave me alone. Don't ask me my name. But I think it's Reb Chaim Shmulevitz who teaches the pasuk to mean Loma zeh tishal shmi. That was the response to the question. My name, my essence is. Don't ask the question. Don't look right here. Don't examine what you're about to do. That's the nature of the Yetzer Hara. There isn't anything there. It's a smokescreen. It's a facade.
Yeah, beautiful.
There's a beautiful story I heard where an Israeli politician went to visit the Lubavitch Rebbe, and he wasn't a religious politician. I think the Rebbe knew that, and he's sitting in the Rebbe's office, and the Rebbe was, asking him if he started keeping any mitzvahs, put on tefillin, and he said to the Rebbe, he said, "Come on, like, what are you trying to accomplish here? You know who I am." So the Rebbe looked behind him on the shelf, and he pointed to what seemingly was a candle, and he asked the politician, "Do you know what that is?" And the politician said, "It looks like a candle." The Rebbe said, "No, it's not." "What is it?" He said, "It's a lump of wax, and through the middle, there's a wick. The wax is the guf, the wick is the neshama." And the politician said, "That's beautiful. That's very nice." And the Rebbe said, my goal is to light as many fires, light as many candles as possible, to light as many neshamas as possible." And the politician said, "Oh, so new Rebbe, light my candle." Rebbe said, "I can't light your candle, but I'll give you the matches. This book, the work that you're doing, it's matches. Everyone in Mirz Hashem should be able to take it to heart, to realize that this is a struggle that we don't have to be on the losing end of. And it's part of the challenge. It's because of the challenge. But Mirz Hashem, we shall be matzliach."
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Meaningful People podcast. We really, really appreciate all your support and you watching this video and you listening to this video. And of course, make sure to leave a comment, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and like this video. And we will be giving away a Collars & Co. shirt. That's right. Wherever you are, we will order you a Collars & Co. shirt on us. If you go ahead and leave a comment, make sure to subscribe to our channel, and like this video on YouTube. And you know what? If you're not a YouTube guy, we'll make it even better for you. You're listening on Apple, you're listening on Spotify. Make sure to subscribe to our channel. Make sure to leave a review, leave a rating, and you will also be entered to win a Collars & Co. shirt sent directly to you. So make sure to leave a review, I think, on Apple Podcasts. You can leave a review on this podcast, 5 stars, of course, and we will make sure to enter you into the raffle for a Collars & Co. shirt. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. We can't wait to see your feedback. Of course, if you have any private feedback you want to give us, you can always send us an email at meaningfulpeoplepodcast@gmail.com, or you can send us a voice note at speakpipe.com/meaningful minute. That is speakpipe.com/meaningful minute. If you want to subscribe to Meaningful Minute on WhatsApp, the link is in the description in the show notes. We have over 36,000 members subscribed to our channel, and you can follow us on Instagram at Meaningful Minute. This week, we just reached over 100,000 followers. That is correct, 100,000 followers. And you can also follow us on Meaningful People Podcast on Instagram. So appreciate all of you listening and joining us for this journey, and we'll be back at you next week for another episode of the Meaningful People Podcast. Surely, take it away. Hope you enjoyed this video from Meaningful Minute. We have so much more content for you. You may like this. You may like this. Take your pick. Let us know what you think.